Welcome to the Inspired Children Parenting Program with Dr. Rosina McAlpine, making a difference to parents and children around the world.
Hello, I'm Dr. Rosina McAlpine and I'd like to welcome you back to another episode of Inspired Parenting Program. In this three-part series, we're going to be looking at recognizing and overcoming depression in kids. Part 1 is all about recognizing the signs of depression. Learn about what it looks like in young children, teens and adults. You'll be surprised to find out it's quite different. In parts 2 and 3, we're looking at how you can help your children overcome depression by looking at the 5 keys toward emotional freedom. In part 2, you'll be looking at helping your children find purpose, dissolve blocks and live fearlessly. And in part 3, the final part, you'll learn about helping your children develop unshakable self-confidence and personal magnificence. Today we're very fortunate because I've got Dr. Samantha Madhosingh here today. She's known as the Emotional Wellness Doctor. She's a clinical psychologist, a certified professional coach and speaker. She's got expertise in the area of emotional wellness, child development and parenting, so she's perfect for our show. For those of you parents out there who are worried about your children, if they've got any problems with managing their emotions, perhaps they might be a little depressed, stay tuned because we've got lots of exciting tips and help for you on the way. So first of all, I'd just like to welcome you.
Thank you.
I understand that when you were doing your PhD and doing your studies that you yourself experienced depression, and I thought maybe you could share that a little bit with the audience.
Absolutely. So it was 1996, 1997, and I was in my first or second year of my doctoral program. And I don't know if you're familiar with when Princess Diana died. I think that's how 1997. Mm-hmm. And I found myself having a significant grief reaction to her death. Now, granted, I'm British, and so I felt at first that there was some validity to that. But then I quickly realized after about a couple of months that all the crying and the not wanting to get off the sofa was not because of that there was much more to it. And so I decided to get help for myself through talking to the program that I was in.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, but it was a very sad time.
Absolutely.
And so many people were upset, and so you might find with your children that there are times that they'll be sad, and that's normal.
Yes.
But the problem is when it's extended, right?
Yes. And a lot of times parents have a hard time with that, especially with adolescence. You know, adolescence is a moody time for most kids at the best of times, but then, you know, for a lot of teenagers it becomes exacerbated. And so for a parent to know when a child is spending way too much time in their bedroom by themselves, when is too much. And so that is kind of tricky because kids at that age do tend to want to spend some time by themselves and separate themselves a little bit from their parents. But you really are looking for changes in demeanor, changes mm-hmm. in behavior, mm-hmm. Changes in their grades in school, changes in their friends. You know, it becomes a jigsaw puzzle, and you put all the pieces together. If you just have a kid that kind of wants to spend some time by themselves, it's not necessarily a problem, but you want to put all the pieces together, and if it start adding up to potential problems, it's definitely worth looking into rather than ignoring it.
Mm-hmm. And if you're a parent and you notice those changes, what would be the first thing that you would recommend to our parents to do?
I think the very first thing to do is to talk to your child,
mm-hmm.
To talk to them about what's going on. I mean, in reality, you should be involved in your kids' day-to-day lives anyway, and having those conversations. How's your day going? You know, what's going on at school? Who are you sitting with? Who are you spending time with? Because, you know, and again, adolescents are kind of a little bit more secretive, but even little kids have difficulty sometimes explaining to you. I have an almost 7-year-old, and when I ask her how was her day, her favorite expression is good. And that doesn't tell me anything, which is what I say to her. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, we have a bigger conversation about what's going on, and we have dinner together every day. And so at dinner, we talk a little bit more about, you know, what was lunch like? You know, what did you talk about with your friends? You know, those types of things. And when you're with younger children, it's easier to get a little bit more information, I think, from them. As they grow up, they become, it's not secretive, it's just simply, there's less interest in sharing everything, and so and again, that's developmentally appropriate, and so it's not necessarily a problem. But you do want to be involved with your kids to get as much information from them as possible and not be a stranger in their life.
Absolutely, and I think emotional wellness starts there in childhood. And one of the things that we do in our family every night is we have highlights for the day so that we can increase our happiness and well-being around what have we done today that's been really positive, and we find that a really good thing that we do. And it's right, I think you're very right. We have a 6-year-old, and it's hard to get more than it was good, or it was okay, or so I think that emotional intelligence and inviting information out of your children really does have to start when they're little.
Yeah, because then there's the expectation of that, right? So they expect there to be a conversation. They expect to spend time with you. They expect you to be interested. The next thing, I think, if you have a child and you determine that something's not right, and if they're reluctant, it may be appropriate to then try to seek some help for them. I was depressed as a teenager, and I never got any help for it, and it was one of the most miserable times of my life. And I can't say that I would ever wish to go back to that particular period of my life. And I kind of do wish that we had sought out some kind of assistance, and maybe it would have been different. I would have felt better. And they say that what I realized through going through my program and experiencing depression that's bigger that time, the second time, once I really identified it as being depression, is that they say that it's recurring. So the fact that when you have it that significantly one time, then the potential of it recurring is there. And that scared me. And for years, until more recently, I lived in fear of being depressed again. Depressed like that, because it was so awful. But then I realized that I have different skills now. I've learned all these new ways of coping and managing myself differently so that I don't need to do that. And I bounce back. Even if I'm having a bad day or a bad week or a bad month, I bounce back much more easily than I did before. And I know that I'm more resilient than I was in the past. And that's awesome. And those tools are so important for children and for parents. Absolutely. Now, I haven't experienced depression before, so and perhaps some of the parents out there haven't either. So what are the feelings, and what happens to children when they do feel depressed? What are parents looking for exactly? So depression looks different in adults and children.
Okay.
And it also probably looks different in younger children versus older children. What you tend to see in kids is a lot of irritability. Okay. And so a lot of anger and aggression and irritability. So we call it irritable, angry, hostile. When you see irritable, angry, hostile behavior in your kids, the potential is there that they may be depressed. Right. So it's often a sign that there's something wrong, and you want to start looking for what the root cause of that is. A child can be, and again, it doesn't mean that they're clinically depressed and they're going to live with depression for the rest of their lives, but they're feeling potentially depressed about something. And you want to try to figure out what that is. Because in many cases, especially with younger children, once you figure out what it is and you can resolve whatever it is that's going on, it will lift. In adolescence, you see the withdrawn, you see changes in grades, you see potential substance abuse, you may see, if it's really serious, you can see cutting, food relationship issues, so either anorexic kind of eating disorder and bulimia type of issues, or overeating for comfort. So there's a lot of different things that you can be on the lookout for.
That's really helpful. And how is that with children different to adults? Like, what if there's a parent out there that doesn't actually realize they could be depressed?
So with adults, and again, there's varying levels of depression. So with adults, you will see, again, some of the similar, but again, different because they're adults. We'll see adults who are using food, alcohol, drugs, or sex to be able to cope. So they're trying to numb the fact that they're in pain and hurt, and they're trying to numb those feelings, so they feed themselves with all these additional things that they'll soothe them for right now, but they don't last very long because they haven't resolved the problem. And so then they need to feed themselves more. And so this is what contributes to emotional overeating, it contributes to drug addiction, it contributes to alcohol addiction, and even potentially sex addiction. And so that's one issue. So the second part is an adult who finds himself to be angry and moody all the time. And so, and they may, even with the people they love, they're taking it out on them. And they don't mean to and they don't want to, but they're so, again, irritable, angry, hostile, and this is how they deal with day to day. The third thing I see often is people who find themselves stuck in the past. So things may have happened, we don't all have perfect childhoods, right? And things may have happened in childhood, it happened 5 years ago, things have happened in the past, and they aren't able to leave those things there. And so they're dragging them along with them every day, and they're not able to move forward. So they feel stuck and they feel depressed in the here and now. The fourth thing that I often see is people who find themselves being very judgmental and critical. And so they may be very judgmental and critical to everybody else out there, but they're also really judgmental and critical inside their own heads. And they don't have a good word to say about themselves. So they think they're stupid. They'll tell themselves that they're stupid. They're an idiot. No, but they don't deserve love. They don't deserve this or that. And they live their life in that way. And it feeds on itself. So you start off with one negative thought, and then there's another and another and another, and then it's just gone away with you.
That makes so much sense, because what we know about, the brain, how it works, is if we tell ourselves the same story over and over again, we're ingraining that into our being.
And into your entire being. And then the fifth thing that I often see is it's about responsibility. And so what I often see is one of two extremes. So either people blame everything that happens to them and in their life on everybody else. So nothing is their fault. They have absolutely no responsibility for anything that happens, and it's everybody else's fault. The other extreme is people who think that they're responsible for everything. So everything that happens, every bad thing that happens in anybody else's life is because of them, that they caused these things to happen. And so one of those things generally, again, it's that negativistic way of thinking. And once you create that thought pattern in everything that you do, it's really hard to overcome that. But again, as you said, it becomes, you've imprinted your brain to function this way. And I feel like what my work now is to help people understand that it doesn't have to be that way. You can change that, and that needs to be changed.
I love what you say there, because if we can create that thought, the negative thoughts, we can create the positive thoughts.
Right.
Exactly. And one of the things that's really important, I was reading some research not long ago about how if people are feeling depressed versus people who are not feeling depressed and feeling happy, if they see the same type of picture, they will pick up on completely different things. So there was one study where there were different groups of people, some who were depressed and some who weren't, observing the equal number of pictures of a wedding scene and a funeral scene. And when you ask the people who were not depressed how many, were there more wedding scenes or were there more funeral scenes, they were like, wow, there were way more wedding scenes. And then the depressed people say, oh, whoa, way more funeral scenes. And so what do we take from that? What we take from that is what we're thinking inside, and what's going on in our brain is what we're seeing in the world, which means people who are happy are seeing opportunities and seeing the good, and people who are depressed are not. So given that, what we really need to do is find out a bit more about how did you come out of the depression yourself? What's one thing, for example, that really helped you move from angry and sad to being able to manage your emotions in a lot more positive way?
Well, it's interesting because for me, I wanted to finish my program, and the way that I was feeling was getting in the way of my progress.
Yes.
And so in essence, if you look at it, I was sabotaging myself because I really wanted this thing, but everything I was doing was not helping that progress. And the program that I was in decided that they didn't want me anymore, and they wanted to get rid of me. And that triggered me into starting to fight for myself. And I decided that there was no way that this was going to happen, and I had to get myself together so that I could have what I wanted, and I was not going to let them take it away from me. And that was the impetus for me. It was a trigger that got me, moving for myself again, and I completely changed everything from there.
So there was something inside you that said, I'm not going to quit on this.
Right.
I really, really want
Absolutely.
to. And where did you go from there? So what were the actual steps that you took? Because I'm guessing that it's quite a road, is it? Quite a road from depression.
It is quite a road. I mean, the thing is that I would say that the whole thing has been a really long process.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was a process that I took to get over being depressed initially,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's been smaller process and different things that have happened over the course of the last 15, 17 years that have really made significant changes. And I would say that the last 5 years has been where I've made the most significant change. And it was then that I discovered positive psychology, which at first I thought was really a bunch of junk, to be perfectly honest, because I had a very pessimistic sort of viewpoint. Even though I was able to lift myself out of the depression, I still had that mindset. And it was through really absorbing the tenets of positive psychology, which is that you don't have to view life this way, and you can change the way that you think. And once I started doing that, and I noticed that the way that I think is completely different, and consequently the way that I feel is completely different. And so I don't live in fear so much anymore as I used to. I also discovered, for me, what my purpose and passion is, and I became really wedded to what it is that I really want to do. And I think that probably was the first step for me all the way back then, was realizing that I really wanted to be a psychologist, and I really wanted to help people, and that was my purpose and that was my passion, and I wasn't going to let anybody stop me from doing that. And so that was the piece that really got me going and got me started.
That's really inspiring. In this 3-part series, we're going to be looking at recognizing and overcoming depression in kids. Part 1 is all about recognizing the signs of depression. Learn about what it looks like in young children, teens and adults. You'll be surprised to find out it's quite different. In parts 2 and 3, we're looking at how you can help your children overcome depression by looking at the 5 keys toward emotional freedom. In part 2, you'll be looking at helping your children find purpose, dissolve blocks, and live fearlessly. And in part 3, the final part, you'll learn about helping your children develop unshakable self-confidence and personal magnificence.